I'd like to welcome Jason Jech. He's the director of the Environmental Learning Center down in Red Wing, Minnesota. A program kind of near and dear to my heart. I grew up in that area and was a classmate and a participant in the Red Wing ELC for several years. So this is kind of a fun program, and it's always fun to be able to up your game a little bit with cooking and campfire meals and whatnot. So Jason was gracious enough to come on and share some of his experience with kids in the outdoors and cooking over fire. So welcome, Jason.
Hey, thank you, Benji. Nice to be here. So, I'll just get going here. So I wanted to start just by telling you a little bit about the Environmental Learning Center, and Benji kind of started by telling you that, but it's a program that started kind of back in the 1960s. A lady by the name of Varge Vogel, who passed away in 2015. She was 103 when she passed away, but she was very involved with the arts, and people would come up to Marge, when she was having these art in the park events, and they're like, Marge, you live in such a beautiful spot. You got the bluffs, you got the rivers, you got the hardwood forest, you got everything right here. And it made her kind of step back and go, we do really live in a very special spot here in Red Wing, and we want to make sure that our young people understand that. And so she approached the Red Wing Shoe Company and said, I've got this idea of Environmental Learning Center. And they said, we'll fund it. And they are still our major fiscal sponsor to this day. So that's 53 years later. So as far as a company goes, the Red Wing Shoe Company is an amazing company. Our philosophy is one of the outdoors is kind of the best classroom, and hands-on experiential learning is the best teacher. And so we adhere to a model that goes, I hear and I forget, I see and I remember, I do and I understand. And that permeates all the way through our program. The programs that we offer are Tiny Trees, which are second and third graders, Young Explorers, which are fourth and fifth graders. We've got our core programming, which is kind of 6th through 12. And then we do adult and alumni programs as well. And so that's open to anybody to participate in. So, but really every step of the way, we're trying to build outdoor skills with these kids. So even with the Tiny Trees and the Young Explorers, these young kids, we're working on the skills that they need as they keep going through the program. So one of those is, for example, fire building and cooking over a fire. And that's where it kind of comes in. As Benji said, I've been doing this for a while, and really there's kind of two critical things that I've found for a successful trip. And if you have these things, even if it's a bad trip in from a weather standpoint, the kids tend to walk away feel like it was a good trip. And those two things are, one, you got to get a good night's sleep. You got to be dry, you got to be warm, you got to be comfortable. And the second thing is you got to eat well. You want food to nourish you, strengthen you, revitalize you, help keep you warm when it's cool outside, and then taste good. And so those things, if you can get those two things, really everything else kind of falls into place. And so, again, our approach to trips is the students actually work in teams of 2 or 3, and they plan, they buy, and they prepare all their own food. We don't cook as a group or anything like that. Each of these teams of 2 or 3 is kind of doing all that. And really, this gives them the responsibility and the knowledge and the skill to do this for future trips as well. And so it kind of sets that groundwork of what they need as they go forward. So when you travel to beautiful spaces, this picture right here could just be a commercial by itself. When you travel with family and friends and enjoy amazing food, it just doesn't get any better than this. This photo really does make you feel like everything's great. And unless you don't get the food right, things can snowball, or you don't get a good night's sleep. Things can snowball in a hurry. So some of the things that you want to consider, or you need to consider, first of all, is what is the activity that you're doing when you're out cooking? Various activities allow for different options. Backpacking requires you to pack as light as possible. Canoeing with no portages allows you to bring the kitchen sink literally. And so weight is an issue that needs to be considered, or doesn't it, depending on what activity you're doing. Next question you got to ask yourself is, what season are we in? Winter allows for a lot of things to happen because there's no spoilage. You can keep things frozen. And during the warmer months, you got to think strategically about, am I going to bring a cooler, or do I need to eat things in kind of a certain order so they don't perish early in the trip? So you're really in the middle of the summer. You also maybe don't want hot foods. Maybe you want something cooler if it's really hot out. So what season are you in is one of those things you got to consider as well. Next one would be the location. Where are you going? Places like the Boundary Waters have a ban on glass and cans. And so make sure you know the rules for the area that you're going to. Glass is really just a bad choice on any trip, but know where you're going, know the rules, and make sure you follow those as well. And then the last thing that I would say that you got to consider is what type of a trip are you taking? Is this a relaxing trip where you have plenty of time to cook? Or are you going to be hiking from sun up to sundown? And this will affect kind of what you want to bring for food as well. So kind of work through those questions and think about what it is you're doing and how you want this trip to go. As far as a safety thing, you want to make sure that when you're traveling, typically you think you've made it to camp and everything is safe and good. And this is partially true, but statistically, if I look at our program and when we have accidents, most of them happen around the campsite. And that's because you're working with fire, you're working with knives, you're working around smoke, which tends to distract you. And so all those things lead to more accidents. You're tired after a long day of hiking. So it's really, really important that statistically you remember that just because you got to camp doesn't mean you're safe now. You got to really kind of drill down. So we talk to the students about that. Again, you're tired and so forth. Animals would be another thing to consider from a safety standpoint. So know the animals that are in the area you're going to. Are there black bears? And so here's, one of our bear barrels doubling as a place to play cards. And so make sure you bring the proper equipment to protect your food. If you're in, grizzly bear country, maybe you cook completely away from where you're going to be sleeping and even changing your clothes. So there's things you got to understand from a safety aspect that will keep the cooking safe as well. So some more factors to consider. Taste is a big one. Eat what you like. Don't try and convert your taste buds to some new types of food deep in the backcountry. Do some taste testing before you go out, but make sure it's something you like. Don't be eating things you don't like. I have a problem. I ate oatmeal for so many years that's a hard one for me to keep eating, but sometimes it has to be. Dietary restrictions or personal preferences. Eat what you like, and again, kind of go from there. Calories are an important part of this, so you're not going to inaugurate a diet program during a multi-night hike. You need ample calories to kind of fight off fatigue, headaches, and again, assist you in keeping you warm if it's in those colder times. Nutrition, it's great to tear into a candy bar on a trip, but really for the long haul, you need those complex carbohydrates and proteins. Intelligent quick eats, such as nuts and dry fruits, kind of allow a stable flow of energy to your muscles. So think about grazing as you go, and I'll talk more about that in just a bit. Weight and bulk would be another thing to consider. Stick to lightweight and low bulk items as much as possible, especially for those long journeys. Ease of preparation, depending on what, again, your type of trip is, you might want just quick, easy meals. If you have lots of time, then certainly kind of going more the gourmet route might be a thing to consider. And finally, cost. Convenience has a price. Freeze-dried meals have come a long ways, but they can be expensive. And so at the end of the long day and your body's tired, maybe you have just enough energy to boil water, and that's what you want to do. So then that cost is certainly well worth it. So I encourage our students, and we do this as part of our planning with our students, is we create a meal plan. We go through and talk about what meals are going to be hot, what meals are going to be cold. And so you can see here, our lunches are typically cold. We really encourage our students to cook both their suppers and their breakfasts, because again, by cooking and by doing that over the fire, your skills increase and you're better off down the road. And so laying out those hot, cold meals is good. Talking about what items are needed. So, we lay out a menu. We make sure we list all the ingredients that you need, bagels. Instead of bringing, just a whole package of 6 bagels, if we only need 4, then pack 4. And then also finally, who's bringing it. And so I did kind of make up this mock-up for Benji and I to go on a backpacking trip. And really pretty simple here. We've got quick, easy lunch type things. GORP. GORP stands for good old raisins and peanuts, and or trail mix, whatever you want to call it. But simply just doing some GORP and some cheese, especially if it's vacuum sealed, will work just fine. For supper, then Benji and I were going to have chicken and rice. And so I always like to list everything I'm going to need here. So you need a pot, you need rice, a small can of chicken, and chicken gravy. And Benji was going to bring all that. And so we make sure that we assign who's bringing what, especially when you're working with multiple people. For breakfasts, again, we were going to cook something. So I decided we'd bring cinnamon rolls. So we need some butter, cinnamon rolls, a fry pan, and a spatula. And then, again, back to the lunches. Bagels and tortillas tend to travel better than bread does. I remember when I first started taking programs here, we'd always bring a loaf of bread and you just stuff it into a billy can, but bagels and tortillas seem to hold up better. And then another thing, and I'll hit on this some more again, is make sure you're getting fluids in. So adding drink flavoring to things sometimes helps students, especially young people, drink water, especially if you've melted snow or things like that. It has a little bit of smoke flavor to it. So Crystal Light, maybe some snacks, plan for the snacks. So I have mixed nuts and some candy bars. And so both Benji and I were going to bring that. So that was kind of the plan there. But again, the grazing is the kind of the best way to get through the lunch. Lots of small little snacks, not just one big meal. Packaging and kind of pre-trip prep, certainly get rid of the bulk. So when you buy macaroni and cheese, it comes in a big box. Get that into a plastic bag. If you need the instructions, you can cut them out and put them in the plastic bag with you. If you have cheese or something you're bringing, or the bagels, bring what you need, not just the whole bag. Kind of go from there. So these are just some examples here of that. And these are just some more examples of some possible foods. You use spices at home, so why not bring spices out on the trail with you? Just because you're on the trail doesn't mean that it can't taste good. And so bring your favorite spices. We put together small spice kits. Certainly pasta and sauce with shrimp and garlic bread. Again, I'd probably get rid of the glass jar there. Here you can see an example of taco salad, I believe. These are shish kebabs. And then there's the freeze-dried meals. They've come a long ways with some of the packaging as far as rice and things like that. I mean, they've got a single-serve package, so basically you can just dump in a pan and heat up. And the same thing with, peanut butter as well. It's in these very disposable, small, kind of compressible packages that make it really easy to take peanut butter on a trip. Hydration, again, is one of those critical pieces that you just got to make sure you're pushing every step of the way. So looking at some meal ideas, I just wanted to kind of go through each of the meals, and everybody's got things that they like, and maybe you have some things that you think are really great. But as far as meal planning ideas, breakfast, again, we want to encourage the students to cook. So energy bars certainly be that quick breakfast meal without cooking, but pancakes, French toast, cinnamon rolls you can buy and basically unroll them and cook them. Bacon and sausage if the weather again allows for that. Winter would allow these things much easier. Any hot cereals, granola, dry cereal, fruit. Sometimes you can find stuff out in the woods and you can gather that as you go. Sometimes it's dried or canned fruit. Bulgur is one that we like a lot. French toast. Eggs, again, powdered eggs travel well for longer trips, especially if you're going to use them for something. Powdered drink mixes, again, think about that as well. Things like Crystal Light are very light and small. Tea, coffee, cocoa are always a nice treat, especially if it's a colder trip. End of the day, just relaxing. The idea is to accent your experience in the woods with the food. So again, meal planning ideas for lunch. Again, these might be more snack kinds of things, but instant soup and noodles, again, the bagels and tortillas versus bread aspect, they just travel much better. They compress and they just fit in your pack better and last. Certainly crackers and cheese. Jerky is a great choice. Again, the gourmet and trail mix. Peanut butter and jelly on your bagels or your tortillas is always good. Certainly some fresh veggies. Things like celery and carrots travel pretty well, and so you can use those. And then dried fruit is always a great choice as well. So again, all these things you can pull out a little bit, snack a little bit, and kind of go from there. As far as dinner goes, there's a whole host of ideas, from instant potatoes to noodles, rice and beans, mac and cheese, spaghetti, Alfredo, breads. Frozen meals have been a thing I've liked recently. You can get kind of a package and basically just throw it in the pan and warm it up. And so again, for winter trips like we are now, that works perfectly. In the summertime, again, you'd have to employ the use of a cooler or some way to keep it frozen until you're ready to eat it. Packaged meats, even Spam and things come in those kind of prepackaged small disposable forms now. We love to do pizzas using like a pita or tortilla and basically kind of a quesadilla, as you can see there. So those are really, really good. And then soup or soup and dumplings is always a great dinner time meal. Kind of a package of dried soup and some Bisquick, and you got soup and dumplings. And so it doesn't have to be heavy, but it can still be good. And then again, I'm just going to go back and talk about this whole drinks. You got to keep pushing the hydration as you go kind of thing. It helps alleviate a lot of things from hypothermia to frostbite to heat exhaustion. And so pushing the fluids is a big thing. So teas and cocos, coffee, some of those things tend to be kind of a diuretic, and it kind of is working against it, but it's about enjoying your time out there as well. So if you need that morning cup of coffee, that's a great way to start your day, and it just sets the tone. In the wintertime, a lot of times we'll use those frozen juice concentrates. Again, winter keeps things frozen. You can add that to your water bottle, and away you go. Tang's been a big thing over the years for us as well, but you just really want to make sure you're ensuring that you have adequate water intake as well. And then obviously desserts are always a great part. And so that just because, again, you're in the woods doesn't mean you have to go away from that. And so desserts are a big one. It could be as simple as just roasting a marshmallow. You could bring s'mores. You could bring cookies. Instant cheesecakes were a big one that we've done over the years. You can buy those boxes of instant cheesecake. And in this case, we added some fresh berries that we found while we were out there. Pudding, even just a candy bar, something small. Doesn't have to be big, but just kind of ends the meal very well for you, and kind of go from there. As far as some basic meal ideas and kind of cooking supplies that you need, a knife, a quality knife is a big part of it. And so we love to have our Leathermans with us. It's a multi-tool that allows us access to different things from the knife to the can opener and everything in between. Fry pan. Cast iron is great if you are not the one carrying it, if that's your partner that's carrying it. Otherwise, the ceramic seem to be holding up pretty well. Not a big fan of the Teflon anymore. That tends to want to flake off, and that's not good. But the ceramic seems to hold up pretty well, and it's lightweight. Then you're going to need a spatula or a wooden spoon, a billy can. Billy can is actually an Australian term for a lightweight cooking pot, and we do most of our cooking in these. We've used coffee liners, coffee cans over the years and different things. Certainly think about having a pair of pot grips or a pair of kind of channel locks or angle bent pliers to pull that pot off. So once you put it on there, you got to have a way to get it off. And so whether that's leather gloves or pot grips, you got to have some way to get that pot off the fire and safely put it on there. Again, I kind of hit on it before, but a spice kit is an important part of this. You want to make sure that the food tastes good. Otherwise, why do it? As far as water treatment goes, there's basically 3 different ways. You can boil, you can treat it through filtration, or you can use a chemical. As long as you bring the water to a boil, it is safe to drink. And so you can use water straight out of the creek to cook your food in, as long as you bring it to that boil first. And then the last form would be a UV light as well. So we do a lot of cooking also in Dutch ovens. And Dutch ovens are basically a cast iron pot, and you can put coals on the top, and so it's cooking from both directions, top and bottom, so you don't just burn it. And so we'll do cobblers in there or cakes, just a whole host of things. So our students have found over the years, sometimes we go out to our cabin for an overnight, and we invite the parents to come out for a meal the next day, and we'll ask the students, what do you want to make? And or many times I've had them say, oh, let's do a Thanksgiving dinner. What do you think we can't make? And there really is nothing you can't do outside on the fire. And so we've done a turkey and stuffing and potatoes, corn, the whole gamut of things. And the parents come out and have a Thanksgiving dinner that the kids cooked over a fire. And so pretty slick and pretty fun and pretty easy to do that. But these skills are built up over time. You don't just get them. And so practicing some things in your backyard might be important. And just kind of go into the woods with a plan and go from there. These are just a few shots of some wild edibles that we've gathered. There's certainly some morels, almost the size of that kid's head. And then, again, our students are required to go out and buy their own food. And so they plan the meal, and then they go out and buy these foods with their parents or their partner. And so it's a skill set that they're developing as they go. And then certainly gathering wild edibles as we're on the trail, blueberries, raspberries, gooseberries, the whole gamut of things that we can find when they're in the right season. We try and build that into the menu plan as well, or at least encourage the students to do that. Things like stinging nettle are a great edible. So with that, I went through that pretty quick, but I guess we can open it up for questions now, Benji.
Turn myself off mute there. Thank you, Jason.
Yeah.
I think a couple of of quick stories that, you know, how this relates back. I love the fact that you guys, and you always have, put the responsibility on the kids a lot. And I was probably 14 or 15 years old, had done a number of ELC trips, I suppose, and I must have complained about my mom's cooking or something, but she said, "Well, you can be in charge of the meal next week or tomorrow, whatever it was." But so I did the old famous chicken and rice on the stove. And
Yep.
I think the family probably suffered through my poor cooking, but and my girls were amazed. They've done a couple of ELC programs and they're really learning how to do that. I mean, something as simple as boiling water for macaroni and cheese. And they came home and they're like, "We forgot to cook our macaroni and cheese all the way." It's like,
Yeah.
well, it's little things that you learn and pick up, which is so important, and it's just awesome. So,
Yep. Nope, I agree completely.
but, um, we have the polling options. Amber, if you want to open the poll, I think that'd be kind of fun. We can see what people are thinking out there. And what Jason mentioned, a couple things. You know, one thing I call this a billy can all the time too, and I notice you did too. But a lot of people don't remember what a billy can is.
I know.
So it's back when they had coffee in metal cans, or you get big cans of fruit or whatever, especially like industrial food places like the school cafeteria. That's what we used for years for boiling water in. And and like you said, would take a loaf of bread with and stuff it down into your billy can, and
Yep.
that would keep it thin, but generally in shape. So
Yeah, it was those little tips and tricks that kind of help, but certainly bagels and tortillas hold up way better than the bread does.
yeah, definitely. That was kind of a game changer. And one of the things, you know, we used to do too is, and maybe you have some better tips for this because I didn't have a whole lot of experience with it, but dried beans are always good for adding to food and protein and whatnot. And we take beans and put them in an algae bottle filled with water and let those kind of marinate and soak all day so that they're pretty much ready to go by the end of the day. Do you guys have make a lot of bean meals and stuff?
We do, and that's kind of the same process we use. Is you kind of have to be thinking ahead, and so in the morning, you'd start soaking those beans so they're kind of ready by the nighttime meal. So thinking ahead about what you're going to eat and what do you need to do to prep for that.
A little bit of planning goes a long ways.
It
So
does. It does.
if anybody does have any questions, please put them in the Q&A function. If you didn't see that bottom right-hand corner of your screen, those three ellipses, open that up. And there's both the polling questions are down there and the Q&A function. The Q&A lets me organize those questions a little bit better. Janine must be watching or listening upstairs. So she said, glad Benji is not responsible for the macaroni and cheese.
I saw that pop up.
Sue was wondering, do you have any pictures of the Dutch oven? You mentioned putting coals on top of it. Do you want to explain Dutch oven cooking? There's actually a whole art to Dutch oven cooking, I think, but
There is, yeah. So Dutch oven again is a cast iron pot kind of thing with a cast iron lid. And if I don't know if can I go back to that presentation, Benji?
uh, there you go. Yep.
This right here is a Dutch oven. So you can see it's a pot, and you basically are just cooking with coals. You don't want to use fire because it's too hot, and it basically creates an oven. And so by putting coals on top and the bottom, you're creating heat on both spots so that it cooks evenly, both top and bottom slowly. So again, cobblers and chickens and all sorts of different things you can. I mean, there's a whole host of things you can do. So Dutch ovens are pretty cool. They're not a light object. So certainly for a backpacking meal, it is not an option for that. But for a canoe trip or a kayaking trip, things where the weight isn't an issue, then it's a great way to go. We use it a lot when we're at our cabins and do a lot of cooking in Dutch ovens then at those times because weight isn't an issue there.
I'm not a peach cobbler fan, but I really like the cherries with chocolate cake on cobbler. It's one of my favorite Dutch oven meals. So, Leo was asking about any go-to websites for camp recipes.
Oh, there's a whole host of books and different things out there. I don't have any go-to ones kind of thing. There's kind of the Dirty Gourmet or something to that effect. We did a lot of gourmet cooking with some of our kids. We did like an advanced cookery program last year, and Campfire Gourmet. There's a bunch of different books out there that have good ideas. But again, a lot of these things you want to try before you go out in the woods. A lot of these things are meant for more of a base camping kind of thing where you have access to a lot of different things. But as far as backpacking or different things, then you want to think about that weight issue and different things like that. And so some of these things aren't practical then.
I know, was it Knowles National Outdoor Leadership School has a camp cooking book, and some of them are great, but some of them, like you said, get a lot kind of in-depth recipes that are a little more complex than need be on a simple backpacking trip or something like that, I think. So
Yeah. When I was going to college, we actually would do cinnamon rolls like from scratch. And there's actually totally different. I didn't even touch on this, but there's totally different ways of planning food. Like Knowles used to actually like give you supplies. Like you'd take so much rice, so much beans, so much flour, and you'd create meals from those items as you went. And so we actually made cinnamon rolls from scratch, using a water bottle to roll them out. And you can use reflector ovens or Dutch ovens to cook them in, and lots of different ways you can go. So there's different ways to do it too. For us, it's just much simpler to actually plan the meal. Things like mac and cheese are just much simpler for our students to grab and do than it is to give them powdered cheese and noodles and think, oh, they're going to come up with their own plan. So
great. Jeff commented or asked a question: what is bulgur? You mentioned bulgur in the
yeah.
presentation.
Sorry. So bulgur is kind of a type of rice. It's almost kind of like wild rice, but it's not. It's a grain. And we fry it up with sausage. And it's one of those things you have to soak overnight kind of thing. It's a great breakfast thing. And so we do bulgur with sausage and peppers and salsa, cheese. A great breakfast thing. The kids love it. You can put it into a tortilla and make it more kind of a breakfast burrito kind of thing, or you can just eat it straight. So, but again, you got to think about, when am I doing this? What type of year? Can I bring sausage with me, or is it going to spoil before I use it?
Julia asked, if you could only bring 3 seasonings with you on a camping trip, what would they be?
That's a good question. Probably garlic salt,
That's a good one.
pepper, and then I love Montreal steak seasoning. That just seems to be a good fit for a lot of things and has a lot of things in it. So those, I guess, would be my 3 go-tos.
Well, I like some spicy stuff, not overly spicy, but I used to bring a little, when they had 35 millimeter film canisters,
Yep.
a little one of those with some Mrs. Dash, like the liquid hot sauce in it. That was always a good thing to spice up eggs or something like that. So
Yeah, each person's individual, so it's again whatever your preference is. But again, the food should taste good. Why be out there eating terrible tasting food and taken away from what you're trying to experience? Jazz it up a little bit. Bring those spices. They don't weigh that much.
And something you mentioned a little bit on winter camping too, and I was talking to Bob Hughes on the radio this morning, and the stuff you eat in the winter, it's calorie intake and getting that your body able to burn stuff to stay warm is a big thing. So he was talking a little bit about hot chocolate and putting a little bit of powdered milk or butter in it to make it a richer, thicker hot chocolate that has a little more calories to it. So do you have
Yeah.
any specific, like, winter, being that we are in winter season,
Yeah.
any
No,
tips or tricks to do that?
we talked about that last year a little bit when we were talking about winter camping, but it's winter time is you want to pound the calories. I mean, that is not the time to start a diet. You're going to eat as much fat, sausage, things that have fat content. So peanut butters, things like that, bacon. A lot of times we'll encourage our students to have some bacon or sausage before they go to bed, so that kind of burns slowly through the night and keeps them warm. The butter aspect, lots of butter and things, again, because it contains that fat, and you can add that to your hot chocolate. The previous director, Bruce Ozzie, was out one time with one of our other staff, and it was so cold on that trip. They were actually taking their bacon grease and adding it to their hot chocolate just to get more calories in, because they just were cold. So it certainly does help. you know, and so
Diet makes a big difference.
it does. It does. So you're either eating or you're moving in wintertime, you know.
Yeah.
So
I may or may not have had that experience of using a wood saw to slice up hamburger or sausage in the morning to get on the fire. So
yeah,
it works.
it
Tastes a little
does.
piney.
Yeah. Yeah.
Helen asked, what are your favorite lightweight foods that'll leave you satisfied? Do you have any lightweight go-to foods?
You know, certainly any pasta, any rice, any beans, those kinds of dishes are certainly because they're dry. They go the farthest and they're the best kind of thing. So mac and cheese is an easy one, kind of a go-to. The chicken and rice is always a good one. Again, you have a can or a package you're gonna have to deal with, so you got to think about that. So um, yeah, wait. I love the pizza thing. You know, those are just a hit and they're easy to do. And you can, again, use either pita bread that's kind of splits open, kind of the pocket pita, or tortillas work great and just treat it more like a quesadilla. Um, just kind of a fun, different thing. So,
I know on our last, one of our last camping trips with the girls, we just found sticks with a Y in them and put tinfoil in between them and then put pepperoni down and then put English muffins on top of it, and then our pizza topping on top of that. And we found if we put the pepperoni underneath, it cooked a lot better than it did on top. So
yeah.
that was kind of a fun thing for the girls out
Yeah.
there. So
What I love about the tortillas is you can flip it and then you can get it to cook evenly on both sides, or even the pita pocket, you know. With the
it's a
other
good
ones,
idea.
it's hard to flip it. So I love being able, because otherwise it burns and then the top is still not cooked yet.
Yep. Chris mentioned the single serving food products, which are great on the front end, but I think the also thing you got to be aware of is it's a lot of garbage to haul out at the end too.
Yep, it
So
is. It is. It's a balancing act with all that. You know, if you really need that can of chicken or that that package of chicken, then that certainly. But the packaging is much smaller than the cans are, so it certainly is a better option as you move forward. But yep, anything you take in, you're going to have to take out. So that's something to consider as well.
one of my most frustrating things in the world is going to a beautiful campsite up in the Boundary Waters or any place really and finding people that take those single serving packages and they try to throw them in the fire and burn them and they just don't. Just
Yep.
pack it out. It's much easier. It's better to do. So
You know this, and I think most people practice this. The whole concept of minimum impact, and what you take in, you need to take out. And we very strongly, even when we're teaching basic programs, we talk about you're trying to leave an area as good or better than the way you find it. And so that's a really important aspect. You come into a campsite. I had this once I think it was up in Canada. We felt like we were the first ones that had ever been there. I mean, we didn't see anybody. We didn't see any sign of people. And we roll into this campsite and it's just full of cans. And it's like, well, I guess we weren't the first ones here. So we picked up all those cans and took them out with us, kind of thing. Again, trying to make it better than it was when we got there. But that certainly takes away from your experience when you're thinking, "Gal, we're the first ones that have ever been here."
yeah, it does. And you like to, yeah, if you can leave it cleaner than when you found it and make sure you pick up after yourself. I used to get on kids a lot with even like twist ties on a bread loaf or something like that. They leave those around camp and they don't look good. They don't belong there. So
It's that micro trash. You know, it's easy to lose because it's such small pieces, but it's as important to pick up those as the cans.
yeah. Jeff put a question here. Any tips or tricks of keeping foods cold in the summer heat while camping?
Short of coolers, and it again depends on what type of a trip you're doing. Freezing that stuff ahead of time. So certainly, like if I'm going on a canoeing trip and I want to have some hamburger or something for tacos or something like that, I will freeze that hamburger and then put it in the cooler along with some other things frozen. I love to take again, pushing the hydration thing. I'll take a jug of juice and freeze that, and that then helps keep the cooler closed. Keep it closed as much as you can, and go from there. But if a cooler isn't an option, then a lot of times you got to give up on those things depending on what season. Again, there's so many variables to this. If you're in the winter season, it's not an issue. But in the summer, keeping things cold is an issue, and you have to move away from those things. So
Yeah. I know our last Barney Waters trip, we have our food pack that I brought in. I just had a small, I don't know, like a 12 pack of Coke type size cooler, and I put some bacon, frozen hamburger, and a couple chicken breast, I think, in there for food. And it buried it in the food pack, so it was kind of covered in there. But we had, you know, that stuff 3 days in, we were still able to. The bacon was the last thing we ate. It was probably the last longest because it smoked. But
yeah,
that worked out really well. Just having that little cooler, kind of all the cold stuff packed in together, and being able to spread that out over a couple days. It was all thought out by the time we ate it. It worked out good. So
yeah, opening that cooler as little as possible just when you need it, and then closing it again. You know, we did a trip a couple of years ago on the river, and obviously, coolers are big when you're doing a float trip, and we still were very careful about when we opened them, for how long they were open. I tried to work quick, and it's important.
yeah, it is. So I'm trying to see. Again, if you have any questions, put them in the Q&A if you can. I get quite a few coming into the chat up there. I put a link in the chat. Somebody mentioned check out the International Dutch Oven Society for Dutch oven recipes and ideas. They do have, I've actually seen classes, people do classes on Dutch oven cooking, but I put a link in there for some Dutch oven cooking. If anybody's interested in that, it's going to open up our polling questions too. If anybody wants to jump on there and answer polling questions quick, we always appreciate those. Those are always fun. Uh, the, the one question, what do you prefer to cook over? If more people are cooking over a fire than a stove. So that's always an interesting one too, because I guess we
Yep.
didn't really talk about that planning, but you go up into the Barney Water, this is the wrong time of year, and they don't want you to have fires up there because of dryness, and especially going out west, obviously these days gets to be a little challenging with lighting fires. So
Yep. No, absolutely. And there's debates on both sides of whether fires are good or bad, whether stoves are good or bad. But certainly there's times where there's bans and you have to use a stove. Um, there's times where fires are an appropriate way, and certainly in winter camping, fires are the way you want to go. Fuel from the stoves in the wintertime can be kind of a danger. So you want to be real careful about that. But fires are they warm you and they comfort you, and you can cook over them. They're in the wintertime, they're certainly the way to go.
definitely. And we have, and how many times do you cook outside during the year? I guess the most popular answer is 5 to 8 times. So people are getting out and cooking a fair amount. So I know in our family, our girls had an awesome fifth grade teacher during COVID, and one of their math projects was figuring out circumferences and all that fun stuff. So I had the girls build a fire ring in the backyard as part of their math project, which we try to get out and cook over that a fair amount. Um, Making hobo dinners with tinfoil, we didn't really touch on that. That's, I guess, not really easy when you're backpacking or camping or something like that, but they're fun around a fire pit. So we're making
Yeah,
stuff
there's
on a stick. So
there's so many different things you can do, and again, I feel like I just scratched the surface, but there's a variety of things you can do. I just had a group from our local fifth grade class. I had all the fifth graders out, and they cooked bannock. And anytime you're cooking something outside, it tastes better. Period. And they thought this was the greatest stuff ever. I mean, they were like, "Can I have the recipe so I can go home and make it?" So
did you have the heart to tell them it's not going to taste as good at home as it does on a
I,
camping trip?
I didn't go there. I just said, "Yep, it's just pancake mix and cornmeal."
Yeah. So yeah, there's a reason you can get away with some of that cooking in the camping trip because you're hungry. Your body wants food, and it's having it taste good is great, but if it doesn't, you'll still eat it. So
Yep.
Brian put a comment in there about some dehydrated complete meals are good summer or winter. Always check the salt content before buying. Easy to use packages for rehydrating with hot water, and easy to flatten and pack out. So I guess I've never used a whole lot of those. Do you guys use those where the type of packaging where you fill them up with hot water and just let it sit for so many minutes, or?
We've done some of that kind of thing, and certainly on some backpacking trips. We used to have that for instructor trips and things like that, but um, it varies. We certainly have some of that sometimes, and it has a good fit. I mean, it is certainly lightweight, pretty compactable, and so those are all good things. And as he says, you just got to look at it. Some things certainly have higher salt content, and different things you may not want than other things, and some things just taste better. It's a personal preference. So this is where I'd say try some of these things before you go out. Have a meal at home, and try some of these things. And then if you like it, or you can season up. Sometimes just adding some of the spices that you brought with will take it to that next level, and it'll taste so much better than just straight out of the package.
Yeah, I think it's important to remember you can do something as simple as macaroni and cheese over a fire, or you can cook a whole Thanksgiving meal on a fire if you want, but it all comes down to time and equipment you have with and what type of trip you're doing. So it all plays a part into it.
Yeah, I mean, how much equipment do you want to drag with you? Do you want to drag a Dutch oven? That opens up a whole thing, whole nother set of things you can do, but it comes at a cost.
Yep. So Julia put something in the chat about foil packets are a car camping staple because she loves to be able to have them there and just be able to toss them in the fire or drop them in a pan at the end of the day and be able to have a good meal quick. So
Yep. Nope, they are a good way to go. And usually it's potatoes, carrots, hamburger, onions. That's what I've seen. I've seen peppers in there, different things, chicken.
so Craig was wondering about different types of wood to use if you have a preference, if you can find it, and then rocket stoves also. I don't know if people know those little rocket stoves. I think this is what you're talking about, Craig. They're small. You kind of fold them open and you can put kindling in them. Is that what, am I on the right line there, Jason?
Well, there's different kinds. There's some of those that are, yeah, they're kind of wood fed. There's also like the jet boils and things like that that are all gas driven. Kind of the jet boil, like I said. But fire certainly, there's different types of wood. Certainly your pines and things don't last very long. They don't create good coals. A lot of ash, so that gets into your food. But hardwoods, oaks, maples, things like that, certainly are going to burn longer, hotter, create coals. And so if you're doing Dutch oven cooking, those hardwoods are certainly a better option because they just create better coals for you to use to cook. So, and again, we used to even take Tarzan steaks, take a steak and just throw it right on the coals. And that's certainly another way to cook. But again, you don't want to be using pine or something like that that has a lot of ash to it. You want to have something that's coals, and then you can scrape those off pretty easily. And again, there's no cooking utensils needed for that.
Great. So, all right, there's some. Well, we always do this over lunch, and we talk about these, fishing or cooking, camping stories. You did mention the winter camping program. So Jason, for anybody interested out there, did a talk about getting into winter camping last winter, I believe. So that's recorded on our website, minnesotadnr.gov/discover, if you want to go back and watch that. And I think with that, I think we answered all the questions. So
Somebody just
any
said
last
fire ash was their
comments?
favorite seasoning.
What was that?
Somebody just said put in there fire ash was their favorite seasoning. That's a good one.
It's an acquired taste, but
It is. It is.
so. Well, somebody put in the chat here, Rhonda, last summer in the BWCA, I tried making sprouts from seeds as I missed salads when camping. That's a new one. Some of those, you had the picture of a instant cheesecake on there with the fresh berries and stuff. And actually I know people, well, one of them, Matt Valiant, we
Yep.
try to plan a Brownie Waters trip around when the blueberries or something are ripe, because that is such a great thing to have, those wild edible type foods that you can add into stuff. And if you know what you're doing or know what you're looking for and can time that right, spending an afternoon picking berries so you have blueberry pancakes the next morning is nothing better than that sitting out in the Boundary Waters. So
Yeah,
it's a
it's one of
great
those
tip.
things you tend to miss. The fresh veggies. Certainly, at least for me, ice. In the winter, in the summertime, when you're on a trip, it's like everything's just warm, and it's like you crave ice, something cold. So you do as much as you can, and certainly bringing like frozen juices can help kind of alleviate that crave. But the fresh veggies and stuff, a lot of them don't carry over very well, and so it is something you kind of crave. And if you can find supplements to that, like wild blueberries or different things, that can help.
Great. I think with that, we'll sign off for this week's webinar in our Moss series. Next week, we have a really fun one coming up. Scott is going to join us for lake trout fishing. So it's a lake trout season opener. If I get this right, lakes in the boundary waters open January 1st. Lakes partially outside or outside the boundary waters open January 14th for lake trout. Again, we talked at the beginning of the program, please be safe out there with this new heavy, wet snowfall. Ice conditions can deteriorate really fast. So use extreme caution going out there, especially until we get a good cold snap again and kind of rebuild some of that ice layer. But everybody be safe out there. I hope with this little warmer weather, people can get out, maybe try a little backyard cooking this weekend. Be a good weekend for it. So get out there and enjoy yourself. Hopefully we shared some great tips to encourage your palate to explore a little bit more. And I put the link for the Red Wing ELC in there, Jason. So if anybody does have any questions or anything, they can reach out to you through the website,
Absolutely.
right?
Absolutely. Yep. My email's in there. So
awesome. Thank you very much for joining us. And thanks, everybody. Hopefully we'll see you next week. Have a safe week and don't struggle too much with the heavy snow. So
thank you.